On a quiet Sunday morning in an early American town, the day began without urgency. There were no alarms to wake people suddenly. Instead, the soft light of dawn slowly entered wooden homes through small glass windows. The streets were still. No carts rolled by, and no shops opened their doors. Sunday was different from other days. It was meant for rest, reflection, and quiet routines that moved gently from one hour to the next. Families woke gradually. Some rose early, while others stayed in bed a little longer, listening to the distant sounds of nature. Birds settled on fence posts. A rooster crowed somewhere beyond the edge of town. The air was often cool, especially in spring or autumn. In summer, the warmth arrived early, but even then the pace of the day remained slow. Inside the homes, kitchens were calm places. Fires were already prepared from the night before, so that little effort was needed in the morning. Bread might have been baked on Saturday and saved for Sunday meals. Breakfast was simple. Cornbread, buttermilk, or porridge were common. There was no rush to cook elaborate food. Sunday meals were modest and quiet. As the morning continued, people dressed carefully for church. Clothing was clean but plain. Men wore simple coats, and women wore long dresses, often made at home. Children were reminded to behave and speak softly. Sunday was a day for order and calm behavior. Voices were kept low, and movements were unhurried. Church bells eventually rang across the town. Their sound carried slowly through the streets and fields. The bells were not loud or sharp, but steady and familiar. They reminded everyone that it was time to gather. People stepped outside their homes and walked together toward the church. Some traveled on foot, while others rode in small wagons. Horses moved at an easy pace. The streets of the town filled gently. There was no crowding and no noise. Neighbors greeted each other with nods and quiet words. This was often the only day many people saw one another during the week. Yet even then, conversation was limited. The mood remained respectful and calm. The church building itself was usually simple. Wooden benches filled the room. Windows allowed soft daylight to enter. There were no decorations beyond what was necessary. The service could last for hours. Sermons were long and spoken slowly. People sat still, listening patiently. Children were expected to remain quiet, though some struggled with the length of the service. Time moved differently inside the church. Minutes passed slowly. The steady voice of the preacher echoed gently. Outside, the world seemed paused. No work was done. No tools were used. Sunday was considered a break from labor and movement. After the service, families returned home. The walk back felt even slower than the walk to church. People spoke quietly about the sermon or remained silent altogether. Once home, the main meal of the day was prepared. This was often the most complete meal of the week, yet it was still simple by modern standards. Meat might be served if available, along with vegetables grown nearby. Meals were eaten slowly. There was no entertainment, no music played. The only sounds were utensils touching plates and the occasional spoken word. After eating, families rested. Some sat by windows, others lay down for a short nap. Sunday afternoons were long and quiet. Children were often encouraged to read the Bible or sit calmly. Play was limited or forbidden, depending on the household. Adults might read religious texts or simply sit in silence. Time passed gently, without clear markers. Outside, the town felt almost empty. Shops were closed, doors remained shut, roads were clear. Even animals seemed to rest. Dogs lay in the shade, horses stood quietly in barns. The entire town appeared to slow its breathing. As afternoon faded into evening, the light softened. Shadows grew longer. Families gathered again for a small supper. This meal required little preparation. Leftovers were common. Candles were lit as daylight faded. Their glow filled rooms with warm, quiet light. Sunday evenings were reflective. Some families prayed together. Others spoke softly about the coming week. There was no sense of hurry, even though Monday would bring work again. The evening moved gently toward night. Before sleep, people prepared for the next day quietly. Clothes were set aside, tools were checked without use, beds were made ready, candles were blown out one by one. Darkness settled over the town. Outside, the night was still. No engines, no electric lights, no distant noise. Only insects and the wind could be heard. A peaceful Sunday came to an end without announcement. It simply faded into night. In early American towns, Sundays were not meant to excite or entertain. They were meant to slow life down, to remind people to pause, to let time stretch gently. In a world without constant noise or distraction, a peaceful Sunday felt complete in its quiet simplicity.
As the night deepened, the town seemed to sink further into silence. Houses stood quietly beneath the sky, their wooden frames holding warmth from the day. Windows glowed faintly for a short while, and then went dark one by one. The pace of life slowed until it nearly stopped. Inside bedrooms, the air was still. Beds were simple yet familiar. People lay down without distraction. There were no glowing screens, no late-night noise, no sense of urgency. Sleep came naturally as the body followed the rhythm it knew well. Sunday nights were often the most peaceful of the week. Outside, the sounds of nature continued gently. Crickets sang steadily. The wind moved softly through trees and along empty streets. Occasionally, a distant animal could be heard, but even these sounds felt muted, as if the world itself respected the quiet of the day. In these early American towns, Sunday carried meaning beyond rest. It shaped the week by offering contrast. The stillness made the coming workdays feel more manageable. The pause allowed people to reflect without pressure. Morning chores and long hours of labor defined much of daily life in early America. Work filled most days, from sunrise to sunset. Because of this, Sunday felt important. It was protected time, a shared understanding passed quietly from one generation to the next. Children grew up knowing the difference between Sunday and other days. They learned patience by waiting through long afternoons. They learned silence by observing adults. These habits became part of their understanding of time and behavior. The absence of entertainment was not seen as a loss. Instead, it created space. Space for thought, for rest, for awareness of small details. The sound of footsteps, the creak of wood, the slow movement of light across a room, all became noticeable. Even boredom held value. It taught endurance and calm. It reminded people that not every moment needed to be filled. Sunday allowed emptiness without discomfort. Weather played a quiet role in shaping these days. On rainy Sundays, the sound of drops against roofs deepened the stillness. On warm Sundays, windows might be opened slightly to allow air to pass through rooms, carrying the scent of grass and earth. In winter, Sundays were darker and colder. Fires burned longer. Families gathered closer together. Silence felt heavier, but also comforting. Snow outside softened every sound, making the town feel even more distant from movement. Church sermons often lingered in the minds of listeners long after they ended. Words repeated quietly during the afternoon. Reflections continued into evening. Sunday encouraged inward focus rather than outward action. Meals on Sunday were remembered not for their variety, but for their consistency. The same dishes appeared week after week. Familiar tastes added to the sense of routine. There was comfort in knowing what to expect. As weeks passed, Sundays marked the slow passage of time. They became reference points. People remembered seasons by how Sundays felt, colder, warmer, brighter, or darker. Life was measured gently rather than counted precisely. The lack of clocks ruling the day allowed people to feel time rather than track it. Shadows lengthened naturally. Hunger arrived without schedules. Sleep followed darkness. Sunday supported this natural rhythm. For travelers passing through such towns, Sundays felt especially quiet. Roads empty, inns subdued. The entire environment suggested pause and reflection, even to strangers. In many ways, Sunday represented shared agreement. Everyone slowed together. No one gained advantage by working. Rest was equal. This created balance and fairness within the community. As the night ended and Monday approached, there was no sudden shift. Sleep carried people gently toward morning. The transition from rest to labor happened gradually. When Monday arrived, it brought movement again. Shops opened, tools were lifted, voices grew louder. Yet the memory of Sunday remained fresh. It softened the return to work. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not a break from life, but a part of it. It shaped attitudes, habits, and expectations. It reminded people that life could move slowly without falling apart. The quiet was not accidental. It was chosen, repeated, and respected. Through this quiet, people found stability in an uncertain world. And so, each Sunday came and went without spectacle. No announcements, no celebrations, no endings, just a gentle slowing, a shared stillness, and a quiet return to rest before the week began again.
Sunday in an early American town did not announce itself loudly. It arrived quietly, like a soft change in the air. There were no sudden sounds to mark its beginning. Instead, the day revealed itself slowly as morning light crept through small windows and rested on wooden floors. Streets that were busy on other days lay empty and still. Shops remained closed with shutters drawn. Tools rested where they had been placed the night before. Sunday was understood as a day set apart from labor, a day meant for rest, reflection, and calm. Inside homes, movement was gentle. Families rose one by one, not all at once. Some sat quietly before starting the day, others looked out through windows at the pale morning sky. The air inside the house was cool and carried the faint smell of wood smoke from a slowly warming hearth. Breakfast on Sunday was simple and familiar. Most of the food had already been prepared on Saturday. Bread had been baked, meat cooked, vegetables cleaned. This allowed the morning to remain unhurried. People ate slowly, without conversation, or with only a few soft words. Children were reminded to sit still and behave. Sunday was a day for calm discipline. As the morning progressed, families prepared for church. Clothing was chosen carefully, not to impress, but to show respect. Men wore clean shirts and modest coats. Women wore long dresses, often handmade and carefully kept. Shoes were brushed, hair was smoothed. These small acts were done quietly, as part of a routine repeated every week. When the church bell finally rang, it did not break the silence. It blended into it. The sound was steady and familiar, echoing across fields and rooftops. It reminded the town of its shared rhythm. People stepped outside and joined the slow movement toward the church. The walk to church was an important part of Sunday. Neighbors met along the way and acknowledged each other with nods or brief greetings. There was little conversation. The mood was respectful and restrained. Horses pulled wagons at an easy pace. Footsteps were unhurried. The church building stood simply at the center of town. It was not grand. Wooden walls, benches, and a raised pulpit filled the space. Light entered through plain windows, casting soft patterns across the floor. The interior felt quiet, even when full. The service began without drama. The preacher spoke slowly and steadily. Sermons were long, sometimes lasting hours. People sat patiently, listening and reflecting. Time moved differently inside the church. Minutes stretched. There was no sense of hurry. Children shifted quietly on benches, but were expected to remain still. Outside, the town remained silent. No work was done, no carts moved. Sunday protected the town from noise and effort. It was a shared agreement to pause together. When the service ended, families rose calmly and left the church without rush. The walk home felt slower than the walk there. Some spoke quietly about the sermon, others remained silent. The streets stayed empty and peaceful. At home, the midday meal was prepared. This was often the largest meal of the day and sometimes of the week. Meat, vegetables, and bread were served if available. The meal was eaten slowly, with little conversation. Silence was not uncomfortable, it was expected. After eating, the long Sunday afternoon began. This part of the day seemed to stretch endlessly. Adults rested in chairs near windows or by the hearth. Some read religious texts, slowly turning pages without urgency. Others sat quietly, lost in thought. Children were encouraged to remain calm. Play was limited or forbidden depending on the household. They might read, sit quietly, or simply wait. Sunday taught patience. Outside, the town appeared almost abandoned. Shops stayed closed, roads were empty. Animals rested in barns or shaded yards. The only movement was the slow passage of sunlight across buildings and fields. As afternoon faded, the light softened and shadows lengthened. The air cooled. Families gathered again for a small supper, made from what remained of the midday meal. Candles were lit one by one, filling rooms with warm, steady light. Sunday evenings were reflective. Some families prayed together, others spoke softly about the coming week. There was no entertainment, no music, no distraction. Silence allowed thoughts to settle. As night arrived, people prepared for sleep slowly. Clothes were set aside for Monday, candles were blown out carefully. Darkness filled the town completely. No street lights, no engines, no distant noise. Only the sounds of insects, wind, and distant animals remained. Sunday ended not with a signal, but with a feeling. It faded gently into night, leaving behind a sense of rest and quiet completion. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not empty. It was full of stillness, full of time. It allowed people to step outside the constant rhythm of work and simply exist. In a world without speed or noise, Sunday was a reminder that life could move slowly and still feel complete.
Sunday arrived quietly in early American towns without ceremony or announcement. There were no sharp sounds to mark its beginning. No bells rang at dawn to hurry people awake. Instead, the day revealed itself slowly through the gentle change of light. Pale morning brightness slipped through small windows and rested softly on wooden floors. People woke naturally, without urgency. Sunday did not demand attention, it allowed rest. The town itself seemed to breathe more slowly. Streets that were usually marked by footsteps and wagon wheels lay empty. Shops remained closed, with shutters pulled tight. Tools rested where they had been placed the night before. Nothing moved with purpose. Sunday existed outside the ordinary rhythm of labor. Homes stood close together, yet felt separate in the quiet. Wooden doors. Sunday arrived quietly in early American towns, without ceremony or announcement. There were no sharp sounds to mark its beginning. No bells rang at dawn to hurry people awake. Instead, the day revealed itself slowly through the gentle change of light. Pale morning brightness slipped through small windows and rested softly on wooden floors. People woke naturally, without urgency. Sunday did not demand attention, it allowed rest. The town itself seemed to breathe more slowly. Streets that were usually marked by footsteps and wagon wheels lay empty. Shops remained closed, with shutters pulled tight. Tools rested where they had been placed the night before. Nothing moved with purpose. Sunday existed outside the ordinary rhythm of labor. Homes stood close together, yet felt separate in the quiet. Wooden doors stayed shut. Curtains hung still. Thin lines of smoke rose lazily from a few chimneys as families warmed their kitchens. The air felt calm and untroubled. Even sound seemed distant. Inside the homes, movement was gentle and deliberate. People rose one at a time. Some sat quietly before standing. Others remained still, listening to the silence. There was no pressure to begin tasks. Sunday allowed time to stretch. Breakfast was simple and already prepared. Bread baked the day before was sliced carefully. Milk was poured quietly. Plates were placed without sound. There was little conversation. Even children sensed the difference between Sunday and other days. Voices stayed low. Movements were restrained. Morning chores were kept to a minimum. Floors were not scrubbed. Tools were not lifted. Washing and mending were left for another day. Sunday existed as a pause agreed upon by everyone in the town. As the morning progressed, families prepared for church. Clothing was chosen carefully, not for fashion, but for respect. Cleanliness and modesty mattered most. Buttons were fastened slowly, shoes were brushed lightly, hair was smoothed and tied neatly. No one rushed another. Time felt wide and forgiving. When the church bell finally rang, it did not interrupt the quiet, it blended into it. The sound was steady and familiar, carrying across fields and empty roads. It served as a reminder rather than a command. People stepped outside and joined the slow movement toward the center of town. The walk to church was an important part of Sunday. Neighbors met along the way and acknowledged one another with nods or brief greetings. Words were few. There was no laughter or excitement. Sunday encouraged quiet connection rather than conversation. Horses pulled wagons at an easy pace. Footsteps moved evenly along dirt paths. The church building stood simply among the surrounding homes. Its wooden walls showed signs of age and use. Inside, wooden benches faced the pulpit. Light entered through plain windows without color or decoration. The space felt calm and orderly. The service began slowly and continued without interruption. The preacher spoke evenly and without urgency. Sermons were long, sometimes lasting hours. People sat patiently, listening and reflecting. Time moved differently inside the church. Minutes stretched. No one checked the hour. There was no reason to hurry. Children shifted quietly on the benches, but were expected to remain still. Adults listened or allowed their thoughts to wander gently. Outside, the town remained paused. No carts moved, no doors opened. Sunday held the town in stillness. When the service ended, families rose calmly and left the church without rush. The walk home felt even slower than the walk there. Some spoke softly about the sermon, others remained silent. The streets stayed empty and peaceful. At home, the midday meal was prepared. This was often the largest meal of the day, though it remained modest by modern standards. Meat, vegetables, and bread were served if available. Families ate together slowly. Silence was common and accepted. There was comfort in knowing nothing else was required. After the meal, dishes were cleared and set aside. The long Sunday afternoon opened gently. Adults rested in chairs near windows or by the hearth. Some read religious texts, slowly turning pages without urgency. Others sat quietly, watching light shift across the room. Children were encouraged to remain calm. Play was limited or forbidden depending on the household. They learned patience through waiting. Sunday taught stillness through repetition. Outside, the town appeared almost abandoned. Shops remained closed, roads were empty. Animals rested in barns or shaded yards. Dogs lay quietly. Even birds seemed fewer in number. Sunlight moved slowly across buildings and fields. As the afternoon faded, the light softened. Shadows lengthened across walls and floors. The air cooled. A small supper was prepared, using what remained from earlier. Candles were lit one at a time. Their steady glow filled rooms with warmth. Sunday evenings were reflective. Families gathered closely. Some prayed together. Others spoke softly about the coming week. There was no entertainment, no music, no distraction. Silence allowed thoughts to settle. As night arrived, the town darkened completely. No street lights appeared. Windows went dark one by one. Stars filled the sky above rooftops. The sounds of insects and distant animals replaced human movement. People prepared for bed slowly. Clothes were set aside for Monday. Candles were blown out carefully. Sleep arrived naturally, without effort. Sunday ended without signal. It faded gently into night, leaving behind a sense of rest and balance. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not empty. It was full of stillness, full of time. It allowed people to step outside the constant rhythm of labor and simply exist. In a world without speed or noise, Sunday reminded people that life could move slowly and still feel complete.
Sunday arrived in early American towns without ceremony or clear beginning. There was no sound to announce its presence, and no sharp line separating it from the night before. Instead, the day revealed itself slowly through the soft change of light. Darkness thinned gradually as morning crept into bedrooms and kitchens. People woke naturally, without being summoned. There was no urgency waiting for them. Sunday did not demand attention. It allowed rest. The town itself seemed to recognize the change. Streets that usually carried footsteps, wagon wheels, and voices remained empty. Shops stayed closed with shutters firmly in place. Tools rested untouched where they had been left the night before. Nothing pushed the day forward. Sunday existed outside the ordinary rhythm of labor. Homes stood close together, yet felt distant from one another in the quiet. Wooden walls held the cool air of early morning. Windows reflected pale skies without movement. From a few chimneys, thin lines of smoke rose slowly as families warmed their kitchens. The air felt settled and untroubled, as though the town itself had decided to pause. Inside the homes, movement was careful and unhurried. People rose one by one, rather than all at once. Some sat quietly at the edge of their beds, listening to the stillness. Others remained lying down, allowing sleep to fade slowly. There was no pressure to begin tasks or prepare for work. Sunday allowed time to stretch without resistance. Breakfast was simple and already prepared. Most of the food had been made the day before. Bread baked on Saturday was sliced carefully. Milk was poured gently. Plates were placed softly on tables. Conversation was minimal. Silence felt appropriate and comfortable. Even children sensed that Sunday was different from other days. Their voices stayed low and their movements restrained. Morning chores were limited to only what was necessary. Fires were tended lightly. Water was carried only if needed. Floors were not scrubbed, and tools were not lifted. Cleaning, mending, and repairs were left for another day. Sunday was protected from labor by shared habit rather than strict rule. As the morning progressed, families prepared for church. Clothing was chosen with care, but without concern for fashion. Cleanliness and modesty mattered most. Shirts were smoothed, dresses adjusted, and shoes brushed lightly. Hair was combed neatly. These small actions were performed slowly and quietly. No one hurried another. Time felt open and forgiving. When the church bell finally rang, it did not interrupt the quiet. It blended into it. The sound was steady and familiar,
carrying across fields and empty roads. It served as a reminder rather than a command. People stepped outside their homes and joined the slow movement toward the center of town. The walk to church was an important part of Sunday. Neighbors met along the way and acknowledged one another with nods or brief greetings. Words were few. There was no laughter or excitement. Sunday encouraged quiet presence rather than conversation. Horses pulled wagons at an easy pace. Footsteps moved evenly along dirt roads. The town seemed to move together without effort. The church building stood simply among the surrounding homes. Its wooden walls showed signs of age and use. Inside, wooden benches faced the pulpit. Light entered through plain windows, casting soft patterns across the floor. There were no decorations to distract the eye. The interior encouraged patience and stillness. The service began slowly and continued the same way. The preacher spoke evenly, without urgency. Sermons were long and steady, sometimes lasting hours. People listened patiently or allowed their thoughts to drift gently. Time inside the church felt stretched and softened. Minutes passed without being counted. Children shifted quietly on the benches, but were expected to remain still. Adults sat without distraction. Outside, the town remained paused. No carts moved. No doors opened. Sunday held the town in silence. When the service ended, families rose calmly and left without haste. The walk home felt even slower than the walk there. Some spoke softly about the sermon. Others remained silent. The streets stayed empty and peaceful. The town did not immediately return to activity. It continued to rest. At home, the midday meal was prepared carefully. This was often the most complete meal of the day, though it remained simple by modern standards. Meat, vegetables, and bread were served if available. Families ate together slowly. Silence was common and accepted. There was comfort in knowing nothing else was required. After the meal, dishes were cleared and set aside. The long Sunday afternoon opened gently without structure or expectation. Adults rested in chairs near windows or by the hearth. Some read religious texts, slowly turning pages without urgency. Others sat quietly, watching light move across the room. Children were encouraged to remain calm. Play was limited or forbidden depending on the household. They learned patience through waiting. Sunday taught stillness through repetition rather than instruction. Outside, the town appeared almost abandoned. Shops remained closed, roads were silent, animals rested in barns or shaded yards. Dogs lay quietly in the sun. Birds moved lazily from place to place. Sunlight drifted slowly across buildings and fields. Even time itself felt less demanding. Weather shaped Sundays gently. On warm days, windows were opened slightly, allowing air to move through rooms, carrying the scent of grass and earth. On rainy Sundays, the sound of drops against roofs deepened the quiet. In winter, Sundays felt heavier and darker as snow softened every sound. As the afternoon faded into evening, a light softened and shadows lengthened. The air cooled. A small supper was prepared, using what remained from earlier. It required little effort. Candles were lit one by one,
filling rooms with steady, warm light. Sunday evenings were reflective rather than social. Families gathered closely. Some prayed together. Others spoke softly about the coming week. There was no entertainment and no distraction. Silence allowed thoughts to settle and rest. As night arrived, the town darkened completely. No streetlights appeared. Windows went dark one by one. Stars filled the sky above rooftops. The sounds of insects and distant animals replaced human movement. The town felt held by the night rather than covered by it. Inside the homes, people prepared for bed slowly. Clothes were set aside for Monday. Candles were blown out carefully. Sleep arrived naturally, without effort. There were no late hours and no reason to stay awake. Sunday did not end suddenly. It faded gently into night, leaving behind a sense of rest and balance. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt complete. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not a break from life. It was part of life itself. It shaped habits, attitudes, and expectations. It reminded people that slowing down was necessary, that rest had value, that time did not need to be filled to be meaningful. Week after week, Sundays passed in this way, steady and unchanged. They became markers of time, measured not by clocks, but by feeling. Seasons changed, yet Sundays remained familiar. This consistency provided comfort in a world shaped by hard work and uncertainty. When Monday arrived, it did so gently. Movement returned gradually. Tools were lifted, and shops opened. Voices grew louder. Yet the stillness of Sunday lingered quietly beneath the surface, making the return to labor feel balanced rather than harsh. In a world without speed, without constant noise, and without endless distraction, Sunday offered something rare. It offered permission to pause. And so, in early American towns, Sunday came and went without spectacle. No announcements marked its arrival, and no signals marked its end. It simply existed, calm, steady, and complete, leaving behind.
Sunday arrived in early American towns quietly, without announcement or ceremony. There were no sharp signals to mark its beginning, and no clocks ringing to hurry people awake. Instead, the day unfolded gradually. Darkness lifted slowly as morning light filtered through small windows and rested gently on wooden floors. People woke naturally, without urgency. Sunday did not demand attention. It allowed rest and calm. The town itself seemed to sense the difference. Streets that were usually busy with footsteps, wagon wheels, and voices lay empty. Shops remained closed, their shutters drawn. Tools and equipment rested where they had been left the night before. Nothing moved quickly. Sunday existed outside the usual rhythm of labor. It was a shared understanding, silent yet understood by all. Homes stood close together but felt separated by the quiet. Wooden walls held the cool morning air. Windows reflected pale skies. A few chimneys released thin trails of smoke as families warmed their kitchens. The air was still, soft, and untroubled, as if the town itself paused in unison. Inside homes, movement was deliberate and slow. People rose one at a time.
Some sat quietly at the edge of their beds, listening to the silence. Others lingered a little longer, allowing sleep to fade naturally. There was no pressure to begin tasks or prepare for work. Sunday allowed time to stretch without demand or hurry. Breakfast was simple and already prepared. Bread baked the day before was sliced carefully. Milk was poured quietly. Plates were set softly on tables. Conversation was minimal. Silence was familiar and comforting. Even children understood the day's difference. Their voices were low and their movements measured. Sunday carried expectations of restraint and calm behavior learned through repetition. Morning chores were reduced to only what was necessary. Fires were tended lightly. Water was carried if needed. Floors were not scrubbed. Tools remained in their places. Washing and mending were left for another day. Sunday existed as a protected time. It was a pause, maintained by habit rather than strict rule. As the morning progressed, families prepared for church. Clothing was chosen with care, but not for fashion. Cleanliness and modesty mattered most. Shirts were smoothed, dresses adjusted, shoes brushed lightly, hair combed neatly. Small movements were performed quietly, with attention. No one hurried another. Time felt generous and forgiving. When the church bell rang, it blended with the calm morning. The sound carried across fields and empty streets. It reminded the town of its rhythm rather than commanding attention. People stepped outside and joined the slow flow toward the center of town. The walk to church was part of Sunday's ritual. Neighbors met along the way and greeted one another with nods or brief words. Conversation was limited. Laughter was rare. Sunday encouraged quiet presence rather than interaction. Horses pulled wagons at a measured pace. Footsteps moved evenly along dirt roads. The town moved together slowly, harmoniously. The church stood simply among surrounding homes. Wooden walls showed signs of age and use. Inside, benches faced the pulpit. Light entered through plain windows, casting gentle patterns on the floor. The space encouraged patience and reflection. The service began slowly and continued the same way. The preacher spoke evenly, without urgency. Sermons were long, sometimes lasting hours. People listened patiently, allowing thoughts to wander gently. Time felt stretched and softened inside the church. Minutes passed without being counted. Children shifted quietly on the benches, expected to remain still. Adults sat calmly. Outside, the town remained paused. No parts moved, no doors opened. Sunday held the town in a tranquil silence. After the service, families returned home in the same calm manner. The walk felt slower than before. Some spoke softly about the sermon, others remained silent. Streets remained empty and peaceful. The town did not resume work immediately. It continued to rest. At home, the midday meal was prepared carefully. This was often the most substantial meal of the week, though still simple by modern standards. Meat, vegetables, and bread were served if available. Families ate together slowly. Silence was common and welcomed. The lack of urgency allowed digestion of both food and thought. After the meal, dishes were cleared and set aside. The afternoon stretched open without structure. Adults rested in chairs near windows or by the hearth. Some read slowly, returning to the same pages again and again. Others sat quietly, watching sunlight move across floors. Time felt unmeasured, flowing without schedule. Children were encouraged to remain calm. Play was limited or forbidden depending on the household. They learned patience and stillness. Sunday taught quiet through repetition rather than instruction. Each child came to understand that the day was different, a pause in the otherwise constant work of life. Outside, the town appeared nearly deserted. Shops remained closed, roads lay silent, animals rested in barns or yards, dogs lay in the sun, birds moved lazily, sunlight drifted across fields and buildings. Even time seemed less demanding, moving at a gentler pace. Weather shaped Sundays gently. Warm days allowed open windows, letting scents of grass and earth into rooms. Rain added a soft rhythm, deepening the quiet. Snowfall softened sounds in winter, making Sundays heavier yet comforting. The changes of season were subtle, felt rather than measured. Each Sunday carried the flavor of its season without needing ceremony. As the afternoon faded into evening, light softened and shadows lengthened. The air cooled. A small supper was prepared from what was remaining of the day's earlier meals. Candles were lit one by one, their steady glow filling rooms with warmth. Sunday evenings encouraged reflection. Families gathered closely. Some prayed together. Others spoke softly about the upcoming week. There was no entertainment, no distraction. Silence allowed thoughts to settle and minds to rest. As night arrived, the town darkened fully. Windows went dark one by one. Stars filled the sky above rooftops. Sounds of insects and distant animals replaced human activity. Even the air seemed to hold stillness. The town rested completely. Inside homes, preparations for bed were slow. Clothes were set aside for Monday. Candles were extinguished carefully. Sleep came naturally, without effort. There were no long nights, no reasons to stay awake. The day faded gently, leaving a sense of peace and balance. Sunday ended without announcement. It was not marked by noise or spectacle. It simply existed, calm, steady, and complete. Its quiet provided comfort and rhythm, shaping the week to come. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was more than rest. It shaped habits, attitudes, and expectations. It reminded people of the value of slowing down. Rest was not wasted, it was necessary. Time could be experienced rather than tracked. Week after week, Sundays passed steadily and unchanged. They became markers of time, measured not by hours, but by feeling. Seasons shifted, yet Sundays remained familiar, offering continuity and reassurance. Their rhythm provided balance in a world defined by work, labor, and routine. Monday eventually arrived, bringing movement and activity back to streets and homes. Tools were lifted, shops opened, and voices grew louder. Yet the calm of Sunday lingered subtly beneath the surface, softening the transition into labor. In a world without speed, without constant noise, and without endless distraction, Sunday offered something rare. It offered a moment to pause, to breathe, and to exist fully in stillness. And so, in early American towns, a peaceful Sunday came and went without spectacle. No announcements marked its arrival, No signals marked its end. It simply existed, calm, steady, and complete, leaving behind quiet strength and a lasting sense of balance that carried people gently into the week ahead.
Sunday arrived in early American towns with quiet insistence. It did not announce itself with noise or ceremony, nor did it demand attention. Instead, it arrived gradually, like the first touch of light against a darkened wall, spreading softly through rooms and across wooden floors. Darkness gave way slowly, revealing the shapes of furniture, the texture of walls, and the faint outlines of people still lingering in sleep. Families rose naturally, without urgency, without the sharp interruption of a bell or whistle. Time itself seemed to slow, bending to the rhythm of the day. Sunday allowed space to breathe, space to pause, space to reflect. The streets of the town remained hushed, the usual bustle of daily life, the clatter of carts, the ringing of blacksmith hammers, the calls of merchants, was absent. Shops were shuttered, tools rested in place, untouched. The air held a stillness that seemed almost intentional, a shared understanding passed silently from generation to generation. Even the wind moved slower, brushing through the trees with measured care, rustling leaves gently without startling the quiet. Homes stood close together, yet within their walls there was a sense of separation, an intimate space for each family to inhabit their Sunday. Wooden walls captured the coolness of early morning. Windows reflected the pale sky, still and unbroken. From a few chimneys, smoke rose thin and steady, the faint scent of wood filling the air. Kitchens warmed slowly, the hearth carrying heat without urgency. Life within each home moved carefully. People rose one at a time. Some lingered on the edge of their beds, listening to the soft hush of the morning. Others remained lying down, letting the last vestiges of sleep dissolve naturally. There was no pressure to perform tasks or prepare for work. The day demanded nothing. It allowed motion and stillness to coexist. Breakfast was simple and mostly prepared the day before. Bread baked on Saturday was sliced carefully. Milk was poured into small bowls or cups. A few eggs or a bit of meat might be heated slowly on the hearth. Meals were modest, designed for nourishment rather than indulgence. Conversation was muted. Even children understood that Sunday required restraint. Their voices remained soft, their movements were measured. It was a day of discipline as much as of rest. Morning chores were limited. Fires were tended lightly, sufficient to warm kitchens and living spaces. Water was fetched only if necessary. Floors were not scrubbed, tools were not lifted, and laundry waited for another day. The absence of work was respected, almost sacred. Sunday existed in the gentle spaces between labor, a pause embedded in the week's rhythm. Families prepared for church with deliberate care. Clothing was clean and neat, not ornate. Shirts were smoothed, dresses adjusted, shoes polished lightly. Hair was combed with precision, tied or braided as tradition dictated. These movements were small, yet significant, a ritual in itself. Time was generous. There was no hurry, only intention. When the church bell rang, it did so quietly, without urgency. Its tone carried across fields and empty streets. The sound was steady and familiar, blending with the morning rather than shattering it. It reminded people of shared rhythm,
the common pulse of the community. Villagers stepped outside, joining the slow, steady movement toward the center of town. Horses walked calmly, wagons rolled with measured rhythm, and footsteps matched the pace of the day. The walk to church was part of Sunday's ceremony. Neighbors exchanged nods and brief greetings. Words were minimal. Laughter and loudness were rare. The journey itself became part of reflection, a time to observe the soft light falling across roofs, the subtle movement of clouds, and the faint smells of earth and smoke. Each step reinforced the sense of pause that defined the day. The church stood simply among other buildings, unadorned yet purposeful. Wooden walls, smoothed by decades of use, enclosed benches that faced the pulpit. Light streamed through plain windows, illuminating the space softly. The interior invited attention, not spectacle. People filled benches quietly, allowing the stillness to guide them into contemplation. The service began with measured calm. The preacher's voice, steady and unhurried, carried stories of morality, scripture, and reflection. Sermons were long, often lasting hours. Attendees sat without checking clocks or watches, their minds wandering gently or focusing intently. Children shifted occasionally, reminded silently to remain still. Time itself seemed to slow, bending to the rhythm of the day. Outside, the town remained paused. No tools moved, no carts rolled, no doors opened. Sunday created a collective pause, a rare space in which the entire community rested simultaneously. After the service, the return home mirrored the calm of the morning walk. Families returned slowly, sometimes speaking softly about the sermon, sometimes silent. The streets remained quiet. The world outside continued its slow drift toward afternoon. Midday brought the main meal of the day. Food was prepared simply but thoroughly, often including meats, vegetables, bread, and occasionally pie or porridge. Meals were modest, designed for nourishment rather than indulgence. Conversation was muted. Even children understood that Sunday required restraint. Their voices remained soft, their movements were measured. It was a day of discipline as much as of rest. As afternoon faded, shadows lengthened, the air cooled. Supper, often modest, was prepared with what remained from midday. Candles were lit one by one, filling rooms with soft, steady light. Families gathered closely. Some prayed together. Others spoke softly of the coming week. Entertainment was absent. Distraction was absent. Silence provided space for thought to settle, for reflection to deepen. Evening deepened, and night arrived gradually. Windows darkened. Stars filled the sky. The town slept without interruption. The only sounds were gentle, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the soft movements of animals. Darkness felt complete, protective, and calm. Inside homes, preparations for bed were slow and deliberate. Clothes were arranged for Monday, candles were extinguished carefully. Sleep arrived naturally, without resistance. There was no need for artificial light, for distraction, for hurry. The day concluded gently, leaving behind balance and rest. Sundays were more than a pause from labor. They shaped habit and character, teaching patience, reflection, and calm. They reminded people that life could move slowly without being incomplete. They offered a rhythm that contrasted with the steady workdays, creating balance in body, mind, and community. Week after week, Sundays came and went in this gentle, measured way. Seasons changed, children grew, adults aged, but Sunday remained a constant marker of time. It was both ordinary and extraordinary, simple yet essential, shaping life subtly without force. When Monday returned, activity resumed. Shops opened, tools were lifted, voices rose, and wagons moved again. Yet the calm of Sunday lingered beneath the surface, providing a soft foundation for the week's labor. The town returned to work, but the memory of stillness remained, guiding the pace and reminding everyone of the value of rest. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not empty. It was complete. It was full of life, though quiet. It provided reflection, patience, and balance. It reminded people that time could be experienced rather than tracked, that silence could be observed rather than feared, and that a day of rest was as important as a day of work. And so, Sunday passed without fanfare. No announcements marked its arrival, no signals marked its end. It simply existed, calm, deliberate, and continuous, leaving behind a quiet strength that carried the town through the week.
Sunday arrived quietly in early American towns. There was no sudden announcement, no ringing bells, no urgent noise to mark its presence. Instead, it unfolded slowly as the first light of morning crept through wooden shutters and fell gently across floors and walls. Darkness receded gradually, leaving a soft gray glow that seemed to stretch time itself. People woke naturally, without hurry, without pressure. Sunday asked nothing, yet it gave everything that rest required. The streets of the town remained still. There were no wagons rolling along dirt roads, no merchants calling out their wares, no hammers striking iron. Shops stayed shuttered. Tools lay where they had been left the day before. The town itself seemed to pause, breathing slowly, collectively, as if the world itself had decided to rest. Even the wind moved with restraint, rustling leaves gently without disturbing the calm. Homes, close together yet private, held their own quiet. Wooden walls captured the coolness of the morning. Windows reflected pale skies. Smoke rose in thin threads from a few chimneys, carrying the faint scent of burning wood. Kitchens warmed slowly. Hearths released heat into rooms with deliberate care. Movement inside homes was careful, measured. Sunday allowed both stillness and motion to coexist without conflict. People rose one by one. Some lingered at the edge of their beds, listening to the hush of the morning. Others remained lying down, letting sleep fade naturally. There was no need to hurry. Time stretched, not in minutes, but in quiet experience. Breakfast was modest and often prepared the day before. Bread baked on Saturday was sliced slowly. Milk was poured carefully. Eggs, meat, or porridge were warmed over the hearth if available. Plates were set without clatter. Conversation was sparse, even children moving softly, understanding the unspoken rule of restraint. Voices were low, movements deliberate, actions conscious of the day's tone. Morning chores were limited to necessity. Fires were tended lightly, water carried if needed. Floors remained unswept. Tools rested where they had been left the day before. Laundry, repairs, and other labor awaited another day.
Sunday existed as a protected pause, a space set aside from the rhythm of work. Its boundaries were felt, not written. Families began to prepare for church with care and modesty. Clothing was neat, clean, and simple. Dresses and shirts were smoothed, shoes polished lightly, hair combed and tied. Every movement was small, precise, and unhurried. Time stretched, allowing reflection in every task. Sunday's pace was intentional, gentle, and forgiving. When the church bell rang, it carried across fields and quiet streets, a steady sound blending with the morning. It reminded the town of its shared rhythm. Families stepped outside, joining the procession toward the town center. Horses moved calmly, wagons rolled softly, and footsteps followed the pace of the day. Neighbors nodded, exchanged brief greetings. Words were few, laughter was rare. Observation and awareness were encouraged over talk. Every step became part of reflection, noticing small details, sunlight on rooftops, clouds drifting lazily, the distant sound of birds or rustling leaves. The church itself was simple, functional, yet filled with quiet dignity. Wooden walls bore the marks of time, benches smoothed from decades of use, the floor uneven. Light streamed through plain windows, illuminating softly without decoration. Inside, people settled onto benches, allowing calm and reflection to fill their minds. Children shifted slightly, but were expected to remain still. Adults inhaled slowly, exhaled slowly, feeling time stretch. The service began gradually. The preacher's voice was steady and unhurried, delivering messages of scripture, morality, and reflection. Sermons lasted hours. Listeners neither checked clocks nor hurried thoughts. Minds wandered or focused as needed, without pressure. Outside, the town remained paused. No carts moved, no doors opened, no work commenced. Sunday held the entire community in stillness. After service, families returned home slowly. Walks mirrored the morning's calm. Some whispered reflections, others remained silent. Streets were quiet. The town continued to rest. Midday brought the main meal. Food was simple but sufficient. Meat, vegetables, bread, occasionally pie or porridge. Meals were eaten slowly, with appreciation. Silence accompanied digestion, reflection, and rest. Dishes were cleared with care, washed and replaced. Even domestic tasks were part of Sunday's slow rhythm. Afternoon expanded like the horizon. Adults rested by windows or hearths, reading, watching light drift across rooms. Children played quietly or read. They learned patience and stillness, observing the day's rhythm. Outside, the town appeared almost empty. Streets lay silent. Shops were closed. Animals rested. Dogs lounged. Birds moved lazily. Sunlight shifted slowly across fields and buildings. Even time seemed softened, measured in light and shadow. Season shaped Sunday subtly. Spring carried scents of growth and damp earth, birdsong and soft breezes. Summer's warmth moved through rooms gently, bringing faint scents of hay and dry grass. Autumn introduced crisp air, falling leaves and long shadows. Winter brought snow, muffling sound, whitening rooftops, slowing motion. Each season colored Sunday, but the rhythm of reflection remained constant. As afternoon faded, shadows lengthened, the air cooled. Supper was prepared from what remained, modest and simple. Candles were lit, filling rooms with steady light. Families gathered closely. Some prayed together, others spoke softly about the week to come. Silence was welcomed, reflection deepened. Entertainment was absent, distraction absent. The quiet allowed thought to settle, leaving room for contemplation and balance. Evening deepened gradually. Darkness enveloped the town slowly. Windows darkened one by one. Stars appeared in the sky. Only the soft sound of insects, distant animals, and faint wind remained. The town rested completely. Inside, households prepared for bed slowly. Clothes were arranged for Monday. Candles were extinguished carefully. Sleep arrived without force. The day concluded gently, leaving rest, balance, and quiet strength. Sundays shaped habit, character, and thought. They taught patience, awareness, and reflection. They provided contrast to weekdays, offering a measured rhythm of rest. Children learned restraint, adults learned calm. Time was felt, not counted. Silence was observed, not feared. Work returned on Monday, yet the memory of stillness lingered, softening the week's pace. Week after week, Sundays passed in gentle continuity. Seasons changed, people aged, children grew, yet Sunday remained familiar. It marked time not by clocks, but by feeling. It carried life forward softly. In early American towns, a peaceful Sunday was not empty. It was full, complete, reflective, and restorative. And so Sunday came and went without spectacle. No announcements heralded it. No signal marked its departure. It simply existed, calm, deliberate, and continuous, leaving quiet strength to carry the town gently through the week.